Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 10th round of the Automobilista Supercars Championship. After 3 weeks break, we head to South Australia for the newest circuit on the Supercars calendar, the purpose-built venue at Tailem Bend, 100 kilometres southeast of Adelaide. Last round, Jake Moloney relinquished the points lead to Kurt Stenberg in this arm wrestle of a championship. My name's Stairs, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome into the commentary box once again, Madbird.
Thank you very much, Stairs. Pleasure to be here at a track that's near to us, if not particularly dear to us, the Bend being the closest one to our actual physical location, so very exciting, and one of the few tracks on the calendar that I have had the distinct apathy to visit in person when we went for the Australian GTs a month and a bit ago. But I'm very much looking forward to this race. It's a track that I've never really watched much of in real life or in sim racing, so I'm very interested to see how it plays out for our runners here tonight, Stairs.
Very good job pumping everyone up for what should be, hopefully, a very exciting night of racing.
Of course.
Let's have a quick look at the points in this championship heading into the 10th round. And as we mentioned earlier, Kurt Stenberg taking over the lead of the championship from Jake Moloney at the previous round at Queensland Raceway. Brodie Steen holds down third place with a 100-point margin over Sean Allen, who jumped up into fourth place last round, which was 4 weeks ago. Ethan Warren also jumping up a few spots with victory in race number 1. He was in 7th, he goes up to 5th. Colin Warwick, the big loser, dropping down to 6th, with Zach Baker moving up 1. Will Devonish dropped down to 8th from 6th place in the previous round, and Jay Borg and Corey Preston round out the top 10.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible that Kurt Stenberg is still in the lead of this championship, considering he has only won, I reckon, one race out of in the entire season. But he's just always been around the podium. Usually, if he doesn't finish on the podium, he finishes sort of high in the points finishes. Whereas Jake Moloney is a winning machine. He's usually on the podium. In fact, he's always on the podium. Every race that he's finished, he has finished on the podium, bar one, at Perth, where he came 15th. But apart from that, he has DNF'd 3 times compared to Kurt Stenberg 0. So, as we say at every race, a DNF in Supercars is incredibly painful. It is a huge loss of points, and currently that is keeping Kurt Stenberg in a position he really doesn't have any right to be based off of his results, Stairs.
Very much so. Speaking of loss of points, there were quite a few drivers who found the wrath of the stewards in the previous round in Queensland Raceway, and as such, some points penalties have been handed out by those stewards. So just to run through those quickly, 35-point penalty to JP Courier. That was in Super 2, not relevant, of course, to the main class, but that was for contact with Instinct on lap 1, turn 4. Turning our attention to the top class, Michael Ford also gets a 35-point penalty. That was for contact with Jay Borg in race 1, lap 2, turn 4. 25-point penalty for Matt Lepoitovan for making contact with Stephen Birchall in the second race of the night. 15 points also going to Matt Lepoitovan for moving under brakes in race 2. So 2 penalties totaling 40 points for poor old Matt Lepoitovan. Zach Baker also picked up a 35-point penalty for contact with Thomas McMillan. And that was one that we caught on the broadcast. He rear-ended Thomas McMillan. You'll see in our highlights during the break. David Nenadic also copping a 25-point penalty for contact with Stephen Birchall at turn 4. And that's not the end of it. The stewards had so much work to do, they didn't actually get all of the penalties done by the time we came around to start this broadcast tonight. So there are still some penalties for exceeding track limits still to come. So that will certainly be something that drivers will need to keep an eye on in future to try and avoid that, because that's a lot of penalties, a lot of points just gone. Basically, 35 points is quite a number of positions.
That is that's a fair whack, and a bit of a shame there for a couple of our drivers. So both the Zach Baker racing cars getting penalties. That's a shame, and Matt Lepoitovan with a double whack, as you said. So obviously, it wasn't a hugely messy race last time out, but I think there was just a little bit too much bumping and rubbing compared to what we'd like to see. We like to see a little bit, but definitely not affecting other people's races, which unfortunately it did a few times last week, especially, as you say, that Zach Baker into Thomas McMillan one. That is something I do remember, and I remember us getting fairly vocal about it in the box, which is fun for us, but probably not very much fun for Thomas McMillan at the time.
Certainly not. Currently, there are just 4 minutes remaining in the practice session before we jump into qualifying. And Mark Pickett with the fastest time thus far. A great start to his Automobilista Supercars Championship last round at Queensland Raceway with a podium finish in his very first race. So good to see some new blood and some new competitive blood at that. Madbird, I believe you're just having a quick look at the Super 2 results. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So we've had the Super 2 race finish. Our winner, Hayden Warrington, doesn't look like he's taken the call up to the main series for tonight, but Jack Handel, who came in second, he's jumped across, along with Thomas Paul, who came in 5th, and we've also got Termo, who came in 6th place, jumping across into the main race for tonight, bumping up our numbers a little bit. Was down around 13, now we're up to about the 17 car mark, so looking like a decent field for tonight, with a few guys who have the opportunity to prove themselves, I guess, against the better ones, just like Mark Pickett did last time out.
Some notable omissions currently: no Jake Moloney and no Kurt Stenberg in the server, though we do believe that they will be contesting as Jake Moloney jumps into the server while we are looking at the screen. So it would be very, very surprising, to me at least, were he not to show up at all. And of course, Kurt Stenberg, being one of the server admin, one of the series admins, you would expect to make it as well. Both admins been a bit unwell during the week, caught some of that flu that's been going around. It's been an absolutely terrible year for flu. Very, very good year to get the jab, I think.
Absolutely. I'm quite happy that my particular workplace is one that provides it to us free of charge. And I've never gone without it, and I've never gotten the flu. So, I guess that could be a false parallel to draw there, or just get your flu jab. $20, and then you're not in bed dying for a significant portion of the winter.
This wasn't meant to turn into an attack on anti-vaxxers, but nonetheless, what are we looking at there?
Kurt Stenberg.
Kurt Stenberg has jumped in, which of course we were expecting him to make it, were we not?
But it has now officially occurred.
It has now officially occurred, that's right. You have to speak into the microphone, Madbird. Minute 30 to go, and Sean Allen is the man in second place. He's another driver who has picked up a couple of wins in Barbagallo, and he's a driver who's just been there collecting the points with his teammate Brody Steen, who's down there in 9th. That's one of the teams who has 2 drivers that are collecting points on a regular basis, and that's got them right up there in the team's championship.
Yeah, I think Race on Oz might actually be leading the team's championship, or very close to it. Just very consistent finishes from both their runners, which is definitely good for them. We do have the winner of the Super 2 race, Hayden Warrington, has hopped into the server, so he has taken the jump. So we're now up to a spicy, I want to say 19 cars in the server, which is very exciting. Race on Oz, as I was saying, currently in the lead by almost 1,000 points over Trans-Tasman Racing, which of course was bolstered by the addition of Jake Moloney a couple of rounds ago. So I would expect that gap to close, but it is a pretty big gap to try to haul in at this stage in the championship.
That's right. We don't have the graphics for the team's championship because they hadn't been updated with the points at the last check, but they hadn't been updated with the penalties, I mean to say. But of course, the penalties so far handed out don't affect those top two teams, so that thick end of 1,000-point gap is still relevant. So that's Race on Oz on 3,356 points to Trans-Tasman Racing's 2,373, and that is a little bit of a confusing stat if you take into consideration that Trans-Tasman Racing have two drivers in the top two of the Drivers' Championship. Of course, Jake Moloney has competed the majority of this championship for TTL Esports, only switching to Trans-Tasman Racing in the last couple of rounds. We're about to get started on qualifying as a silence falls over the racetrack.
It does. Nice and peaceful before the engines start to rise and roar in this purpose-built pit lane. Just above in those windows on the left-hand side, I had a rather nice burger. And a couple of beers, no dark ales, mind. As we watched some cars. Oh, got a good view there of the Stewards Tower. I believe we were standing right where that man in the beanie is standing, and that picture of the teenager with the star on his shirt is actually a photograph of our good friend James Donovan, who, he's doing a heckin' concern. To use the kids' language, he's absolutely loving it. He is keen. He's keen as a bean, as they say. As we've got cars coming out into the pit lane stairs, my goodness, save me from this.
Yes, it's surprising actually such little activity on the racetrack towards the back end of that practice session, because it is a brand new circuit for a lot of these drivers. It is a conversion from R Factor, so some of them will have done it on there. Let's have a look at this racetrack from the perspective of Colin Warwick. This opening sequence of corners, if anyone's familiar with the opening sequence of corners at the Singapore Street Circuit, it's kind of like that in reverse, except with nothing on the outside, just grass. Here is the fastest corner of the racetrack, down into turn 5, and a prime overtaking opportunity down into this hairpin here at turn 6, and putting a lot of pressure on the right hand side tyres. And then this is where the racetrack sort of disappears out of sight to anyone who's in the grandstands. Lots of right hand corners that just put a huge amount of pressure, very, very quick corners, and a huge amount of pressure on that left hand side of the car. Turn 11 and 12, bit of a change of direction, but then you're back turning right again down towards turn 13. A bit of a straight, down a bit of a hill. All of the earth moving that was done on this racetrack to create a little bit of elevation, not natural elevation, because of course this racetrack is about as flat as Pepsi that's been left out for 3/4 of a century. And then the cars dip back into sight of the pit building around this double left-hander, followed by a right-hander towards the penultimate corner, turn 17. Quite a sharp corner, a little bit more than 90 degrees. Quick short shoot down to the final corner, where you want to get a really, really good exit because it is one of the longest straights in Supercars. And he's going to start his lap.
I'm noticing he is bashing off the limiter at several points during the lap, which I imagine his car won't be too happy about, but hopefully his lap time is happy about it. We've just got Joel Smith in the chat saying small field tonight. Not too bad. We've got 20. We've got 20. We've got 23 people in the server by the looks of it. So looking like a pretty good field. It was looking a little bit small early on. We only had about 13 cars in, but we've had a veritable wave of people come rushing in. So we've got confirming we've got 23 people in the server at the moment. I think a couple more have gotten the call up from Super 2 just to pad the numbers a little bit, and also give us some of the more rookie drivers an opportunity to shine in the big leagues. Basically, Colin's now about halfway through his lap. It's looked pretty clean. It's looked pretty clean so far. Is the word that I was looking for, Stairs?
Yeah, it takes quite a long time for the lap times to come in because it's a near 2-minute lap time, which is quite a long time. Colin Warwick was the first man to go through the first sector. He said a 40.9, but that's been since surpassed by a couple of drivers, Jake Moloney and now Ethan Warren with the fastest sector time in sector number 1 with a 40.2. Jake Moloney, meanwhile, on a 40.5, so about 0.3 slower than Ethan Warren through the first sector.
Yeah, that's not really surprising anyone, I wouldn't think. Ethan Warren is an absolute beast when it comes to pace. Both the Warrens are, really. Ethan will be watching with bated breath. He's about to come across the start or the second sector split, and he is faster again than Colin Warwick by about 0.3, 33.0 through the second sector for Ethan Warren. So blistering pace as he's coming towards the last section of the lap. Colin Warwick goes fastest provisionally. Never mind, Zach Baker has stolen it away from him almost immediately. But we should have Ethan Warren coming across the line in a second. Jake Moloney has set a lap time that is fastest so far, with Kurt Stenberg just behind him and Ethan Warren 0.6 up on Jake Moloney's time. Goodness me.
All right, that's a first benchmark from everyone. We've got them in roughly an order. And again, looks like the battle for pole position is going to be between Ethan Warren and Jake Moloney. So a 49.2 for Ethan Warren. Jake Moloney, wow, 0.6 behind him. But Kurt Stenberg, he'll be pretty happy with where he is so far in the top 3.
Thank you for passing the microphone to me while I was in the middle of a yawn. Kurt Stenberg, yeah, he would definitely be happy. He's been a bit off the pace with qualifying laps the last few rounds. I think he's never really had the pace in qualifying to trouble Jake Moloney, which has played into Jake Maloney's hands with being able to get a decent start and jump off the line. But maybe if Kurt can just start either the same row or just the row behind Jake Moloney, then he can lock onto the back of him like a bulldog and hold onto him as hard as he possibly can. We have a Ford AU Falcon in the chat just saying, shaking my head, Mustang Aero advantage. I'm not sure how much of that is simulated. And
somewhere between 10% and 0%. In fact, it's a lot closer to the 0, I believe.
Yeah, so probably not too much of an advantage in the Mustang. I'd say 99% of that lap time was just Ethan Warren being an alien.
While we're talking there, Colin Warwick went a bit faster than his fastest lap in this session, found himself in 4th place, so he'll be pretty happy with that as we have everyone coming into the pits. The thing is, we're already only 3 minutes away from the end of this session because it's such a long lap, long out lap, long in lap, as the Trans-Tasman Racing drivers come into their pit boxes in formation. They have to get out there very, very quickly indeed to get one last lap in.
Yeah, it is it's a deceptively long lap because you look at the map and it doesn't look huge, but as you say, it's a better part of two. Oh my God, can't speak tonight. It is the better part of a 2-minute lap time, so it is. You either need to fuel yourself for a few runs and then take the pain of having a heavier fuel load, or you're going to have to hope that you can get a decent outlap and find yourself in some clear track to do one last one last hot lap before the end of the session, and it's a bit of a gamble sometimes because you can always come across some lap traffic or some other people slower than you on some hot laps. Mark Pickett is throwing himself up into second place.
Yeah, it's a great lap there from Mark Pickett. He set the fastest middle sector on that lap, so that's thrown down the gauntlet a little bit to Jake Moloney, who's currently on his out lap, and Kurt Stenberg likewise. Ethan Warren is just coming out now, and he'll be one of the last actually to come across the line. 2 minutes 30 when he came out of the pit lane.
Interesting to see whether Jake Moloney can better that lap time. He's just under a tenth of a second behind Mark Pickett's time at the moment. So I reckon he's got that in him if he can find some clear track, and it looks like he is in some clear track. The next car is probably a decent 5 or 6 seconds up the road from him. So if he can stay in this little niche on the track and punch in a hot lap time, then I reckon he might jump himself back up onto that front row again. But who knows if Mark Pickett or Ethan Warren can improve further still. Still got about a lap worth of time in this session, Stairs.
That's right, one more lap for the front runners, and if you're not on the racetrack now doing your out lap, you will not get in. So Mark Pickett's gone into the pits. He's not going to improve on a 49.8. Ethan Warren, Jake Moloney, Kurt Stenberg, Sean Allen, Zach Baker, and Brody Steen are the only ones left in the top 10 who can improve. Actually, Will Devonish, add him to that list. He's on the racetrack as well, and he's currently rounding out the top 10 as Jake Moloney starts his lap.
Yeah, so be interesting here to see if he has a bit more pace in him. This is going to be his last chance to do a flying lap. He has caught up onto the back of, I believe that's either Zach Baker or David Nanadick, one of the Zach Baker racing cars. He's sort of fallen back into Jake Moloney a bit over the last half a lap or so. So hopefully he isn't on a hot lap and he just jumps out of the way for Jake, because it looks as if Jake's closing up on him already, and that's going to affect his time for sure. Jake Moloney coming up to the first sector split, and he goes fastest. Yeah, so he is 0.006 of a second faster than Ethan Warren through the first sector so far. He's getting awfully close to the back of that Zach Baker racing car though. Oh, and especially after he dips a tyre in the grass. Just get out of the way, mate. Oh, and then he locks up for good measure. The lap is gone. Please remove yourself from Jake Moloney's, and he has. He's pulled out of the way, so good effort there.
And Jake didn't have his headlights on, so Zach may not have known that Moloney was on a fastest lap there, although given the time in the session, you would certainly assume so. This is going to be mighty, mighty tight. 0.2 of a second up on his PB, but he's down on Ethan Warren through the second sector split. Ethan Warren has set the fastest first sector on his lap, so Ethan Warren looks like he's going to move that goalpost. So Jake Moloney, even if he does jump up ahead of Ethan Warren may well improve as well. A little bit of a wiggle through the penultimate corner. One more to go for Jake Moloney, and that will be it in this qualifying session from his perspective. Looks pretty clean. Down to the line. Takes a long time to get there. Will it be enough to move the goalpost? No, he stays third. He only improves by 0.75 of a tenth of a second.
Absolutely gutting. That was looking like a hot lap, and in the end it does not improve his position at all. Kurt Stenberg likewise wasn't able to improve on his position. He will be starting from fourth at the moment, although there's no one really who can push them any further down. Ethan Warren though can make the pain a little bit worse by setting an even faster lap time, and his time so far this particular lap would imply that is going to be the case. Rounds the corner, decent line, gets on the power nice and early, straight down this long run, and he improves his time by 0.5 tenth. So just to show that there was a little bit more in the kitty.
Yeah, rubbing salt into the wound, as you said, Ethan Warren. He didn't need to finish that lap, but he wanted the bragging rights, and he was fastest in sectors 1 and 2, and second only to himself in the third sector on that final lap. So 49.2 is the lap there from Ethan Warren, showing how quickly he can adapt to a brand new circuit, and that is going to put him in very good stead for the race. And a great job from Mark Pickett to stay ahead of Jake Moloney, only by a few thousandths of a second, and Kurt Stenberg in fourth place with Sean Allen rounding out the top 5. So very, very interesting, this battle between Ethan Warren and Jake Moloney. Ethan Warren has had the pace to put it up against Jake Moloney quite a few times in the last few races. Jake Moloney did manage to beat him last time out in QR, but it's just a shame that Ethan Warren has missed quite a few races in this championship. Otherwise, it'd be a lot further up. But given the drop round still to come into effect later on in this season, and of course the Enduros, he's still very much in this championship if he can get a few more wins and maybe Jake Moloney has a bit of bad luck.
Absolutely, and Kurt Stenberg still just lurking at the... So I say lurking, he's leading the championship, but just kind of flying under the radar, just getting decent results week in, week out, and remaining up there. He'll be starting from alongside Jake Moloney, so can he get a good start and jump ahead of his championship protagonist into turn 1? It is a very long straight. There is going to be a lot of opportunity to do some slipstreaming at the race start. It's going to be interesting, Stairs.
It most certainly will. Don't go anywhere. We'll bring you all the action from race 1 in just a moment at the Bend.
Our live coverage of the Automobilista Supercars Championship will be back shortly. For more information about the Automobilista Supercars Championship, including race results and official championship points, don't forget to visit the Automobilista Supercars Facebook and Instagram pages for all the latest news and results. To enhance your watching experience, you can follow all of the live timing for each race at rsmclanau.liveraces.com.
Welcome to the previous round recap, brought to you by Apex Rear Wing. The 9th round of the Automobilista Supercars Championship took us to Queensland Raceway for the Ipswich SuperSprint. It was the championship leader Jake Moloney who took pole position for race 1, but Ethan Warren got the better start, with Moloney's new TTR teammate Kurt Stenberg starting from the rear of the grid. Lap 6, Stenberg had managed to get into the top 10 and had a nice battle with Matt Lepoitovan over 9th place. Meanwhile, at the front, Ethan Warren and Jake Moloney were having a great battle. But technical dramas would ruin the race for us, as an apparent connection issue dropped him out of the server. Despite a big mistake at turn 6, Kurt Stenberg had the rub of the green, continuing to make progress into the top 10 and putting himself in a position to recapture the lead of the championship. Meanwhile, Thomas McMillan and Zach Baker had a terrific tussle for 4th place, which looked like it might be decided in favour of Zach Baker until a spin at turn 3 for him saw it all go up in smoke, the mistake putting Kurt Stenberg up 1 more place. Back at the front, Ethan Warren had a blissfully lonely race, winning his 4th race of the year by 8 seconds over Sean Allen and Mark Pickett, who started his ASC career in fine form with a podium finish in his very first race. For race 2, Jake Moloney claimed another pole position, and not wishing to break tradition, Ethan Warren claimed the spot alongside him. This time though, it would be Jake Moloney who would lead out of turn 1 with plenty of action in behind. Ethan donned his scuba suit for lap 2 and had a huge dive at turn 3, but Moloney saw him coming and resisted the attack. After regrouping, Ethan had reeled Moloney back in and executed a much more precise manoeuvre and grabbed the lead of the race. Behind the leaders, Thomas McMillan was doing a stellar job holding off a big pack of cars for the final spot on the podium. It didn't take long for the battle to get heated, and a bit of bumping and barging brought a bunch of others into the fight. While the melee in the mid-pack raged on, Moloney returned serve on Ethan Warren. Recovering from an earlier off, Thomas McMillan found himself in the wars again, getting a punt from Zach Baker, and was fortunate not to collect Kurt Stenberg as he exited stage right. It looked like it was Kurt's night, as a spin from Mark Pickett at the next corner promoted him up another position to 4th. By the time the pit stop started shaking out, Ethan Warren had managed to reclaim the lead from Jake Moloney in the arm wrestle that was this race. With Jake staying out a couple of laps longer than Ethan, he managed to effect an overcut which saw him rejoin ahead and with newer tyres. Kurt Stenberg was eager to relieve Sean Allen of his final spot on the podium, but Allen was having none of it, with the two fighting fiercely. Jake Moloney righted the wrong of race 1 to grab the victory from Ethan Warren, and Sean Allen held off the challenge from the new championship leader Kurt Stenberg.
Welcome back to the Bend for round 10 of the Automobilista Supercars Championship. We're all set to get running on race 1, 12 laps around this 4.95 kilometre circuit. Anti-clockwise, which is quite unusual for a Supercars circuit. Most of them are clockwise, and it's just the sprint race. The pit stop race comes in race 2, so it's fastest across the line, no pit stops, and let's see who's got the right stuff.
Absolutely, good little siding race for all of our runners. Can get a decent, if they haven't raced the track before, which a lot of these guys wouldn't have. They can get a decent idea of where they can brake, how the track evolves over the course of the race. It's a pretty odd pit grid lane, start finish lane, where it almost looks as if Mark Pickett in second place is ahead of Ethan Warren on the line. It might just be a trick of the Mustang being a sort of stubbier car. Their tyres. No, it does look as if Ethan Warren is. It looks as if the odd numbers, first, third, fifth, etc., are offset behind the even numbers, which is not what you want to see when you've bled your blood to put it on pole.
It's a bit strange, but of course there is a little bit of leeway when they move into their grid boxes, and Jake Moloney may well just be a little bit Ethan Warren may well just be a little bit closer to the front of his grid box when he actually lines up at the end of this warm-up lap. Said Jake Moloney before, it's a bit of a force of habit. He has been on pole position quite a lot of times in this championship. Let's go through the grid. As we saw just a few moments ago, Ethan Warren with a stellar lap in qualifying, 2 stellar laps in qualifying, which both would have been good enough for pole position. He'll start ahead of Mark Pickett, who's having a glittering start to his Automobilista Supercars Championship, and behind him is Jake Moloney, currently second in the championship, but has led it at various points throughout. Kurt Stenberg in 4th place, carrying the orange number 47. Actually, it's not orange, it should be, because he does lead the championship. So that's a little bit of a thing that he probably should have had rectified for him. Sean Allen in 5th place for Race on Oz, starts ahead of Zach Baker in 6th place. Brody Steen is in 7th place, so it's a good qualifying session for those 2 Race on Oz cars. Colin Warwick down in 8th place for Stealth Penrite Racing, shuffled down the order a little bit towards the back end of that qualifying session. Jack Handel, great to see a driver head straight out of Super 2 and make his way into the top 10, and a very colourful livery, very distinctive, and that's what we very much like as commentators. Matthew McCutcheon in 10th place, privateer there in the Nissan Altima. Behind him, Hayden Warrington in 11th place, starting ahead of Will Devonish, who has collected a number of points in this championship, and that's why he's in the top 10, just because of the consistent finishes that he does collect. David Nenadich starts in 13th place. Oz Robb in 14th place, another of the 2-car teams together with Will Devonish. Wayne Carr for Rock Solid Mates Racing in the number 81. Aidan Schultz in the number 11, starts out of 16th place, ahead of Mitch Hathaway. Stephen Birchall will start 18th. Jay Borg in 19th. Termo in 20th. RSM Latino in 21st. And Thomas Paul and Nigel Manif round out the grid.
Yeah, it's an interesting line upstairs, especially that second row. I cannot wait to see how these 2 differing Trans-Tasman Racing drivers take the start, and who gets into turn 1 ahead.
Well, if you need help deciphering, it's the yellow mirrors on the right of Jake Moloney, and on the left is Kurt Stenberg with the orange mirrors. We're about to go racing, and it's a pretty even start from the top 2, but it looks like Ethan Warren is just a nose ahead as they go down to turn 1, and they all fan out because it's such a long way down to turn 1. They go through about 2 or 3 camera posts before they hit the braking zone. Now the anchors come on and they fan out. It looks like Ethan Warren has got the whole shot. Oh, we got a spinner there. Might be Colin Warwick has gone around. Did he get a helping hand? That's a very, very bad start. Very unfortunate, down into 23rd place and last. A lot of work to do there for Colin Warwick. But Mark Pickett, who was under pressure from the Trans-Tasman Racing guys through turn 1, has managed to stretch away a little bit and, if anything, occupy the mirrors of Ethan Warren.
Yeah, very, very good start there from second place man Mark Pickett to hold on to that position. It looks as if not Kurt Stenberg, Colin Warwick did get a little bit of help there from one of the, I reckon that would be Brodie Steen, the other Race Honours racing car. He just gave him a little bit of a shoulder bunt as they went around the corner, and just helped him around a little bit. So won't be happy, will Colin Warwick, who's now down into 20th with everything to do. But as you say, at the front of the field, it is as we began is how we continue. Ethan Warren from Mark Pickett, from Jake Moloney, from Kurt Stenberg, and Sean Allen is already about just over 3/4 of a second down on Kurt Stenberg, who is occupying incredible real estate in his teammate Jake Maloney's mirrors at the moment.
Still on the first lap. It is a very, very long lap, and Ethan Warren has now pulled away another car length as Mark Pickett begins to come under a bit of pressure from Jake Moloney, sizing himself up for a good exit out of the final corner here, and perhaps a slipstream down this very, very long straight. So Kurt Stenberg and Jake Moloney line astern, the two Trans-Tasman guys, and it looks like Mark Pickett has, if anything, slightly better top speed than both of those Trans-Tasman guys. As if anything, he pulled away a little bit. Bit of a lock-up for the front right there, and the positions stay as they were.
Must be an awkward track to set your gears up for, because you'd want very long gears for that long straight, but then the rest of the track is quite. You'd probably want to be sort of low down in the gears, because it's all very lots of sweeping corners. Not sure what Jake Moloney was doing there, if he just takes a differing line to the cars around him, but that was almost a huge dive on Mark Pickett in the least dramatic way possible. Nothing's happened from it, so we're continuing on as normal. But Kurt Stenberg would be looking at that thinking, mate, what are you doing? As we've got Sean Allen still dropping back from this front pack, and his teammate Brodie Steen up a position off the start, which I believe was that position I was talking about with Colin Warwick. So that position may be in doubt. Further on in the top 10, we have Zach Baker, who's lost a position off the start. Jack Handel up into 8th, so very well done for the Super 2 promotee. And so too for Thomas Paul, another one of the promotees from Super 2, and Matthew McCutcheon, the privateer, currently rounding out the top 10.
Let's draw our attention now to Colin Warwick, who he was in 23rd place after that first corner spin. He's already found his way up into 12th place, so off our screens, he's been having an absolute whale of a time, passing car after car after car, while the top 5 are more or less as they started. So Colin Warwick already up to 12th place and is knocking on the door of the top 10 already.
We've had a DNF. Will Devonish for War Race Engineering has exited the game. I'm going back to see if I can find a replay for what that was, but that is a damn shame for some. That is a.
We've got a spinner there. It's one of the privateers. I can't remember who that was. It might have been Matthew McCutcheon actually having a spin out of turn 1, and that has gifted another position. He's rejoined in 18th, just ahead of Thomas Paul, I believe that is, and looks like he got a wheel on the curb there and was thankfully not in anyone's way. All sorts of stuff kicking on, too wide action going on in the back of the shot there, and Matthew was able to recover onto the track just ahead of was that Thomas Paul or was it Hayden Warrington? Anyway, it was Hayden Warrington, who's now ahead of him.
The battle for third place is hotting right up. We've got Jake Moloney and Kurt Stenberg almost side by side. They've been under a couple of tenths for a few corners now. Kurt Stenberg trying to sneak up the inside as we're in the last sector here of the track, but nothing doing. He's going to try to slip in behind. I think waiting until that start-finish straight. He's going to have a go into the penultimate corner. Never mind my advice. Nope, he isn't able to get it done. Jake Moloney just holds a little bit more speed around the outside, but that long start-finish straight is going to give him an incredible slingshot down the side of his teammate Jake Moloney.
And this is letting Mark Pickett off the hook just a little bit. As they're fighting each other, Mark is stretching away, and Jake Moloney just struggling for pace at this stage. Now, Kurt Stenberg pulls to the inside, down into turn 1, and will try and outbrake Jake Moloney, but Jake Moloney carries a bit of speed around the outside, and they both go off the racetrack just a little bit, and Jake Moloney hangs on to third place. A little bit of a lock-up ahead for Mark Pickett, who is over a second ahead. Ethan Warren already seemingly has checked out.
Absolutely. We have also lost Nigel Marneef from this race. And going back to have a quick look at the replay between himself and Will Devonish, they were both at the same point of the track. They got caught on a bit of curbing, which just slingshot them directly out and into a wall, causing some fairly massive damage. So that might be a little point of concern for the rest of our surviving runners. Quite a nasty bit of track that by the looks of it. I will point it out when it comes up on our screens. It is right there actually, where Kurt Stenberg and Jake Moloney have just gone through that tight right-hander. Just after that, there's a bunch of curbing where the different layouts of the track split off, and it looks as if the track might be a little bit dodgy there, Stairs.
Yeah, that's very, very bad luck there for Nigel Marneef. He's been one of the drivers who has impressed me since he started in this championship, but unfortunately he'll get no further chance to do so in this particular race. Hopefully he'll come back fighting in race 2. Ethan Warren still leading by 2.5 seconds now from Mark Pickett. Jake Moloney just stretching away a little bit from Kurt Stenberg on the last lap, and those guys are fairly status quo as Ethan Warren sets the fastest lap of the race. It's a lonely old race for Sean Allen behind them in 5th place, and Brody Steen starting to come under a bit of pressure here from Zach Baker. And Zach Baker almost looking like he's shaping up for a move down into turn 1. Will try and outbrake, goes to the inside, no thought of a defensive maneuver for Brody Steen, and they go side by side, and that'll give Brody Steen the inside for turn 2, but Zach Baker's nicely placed to have the inside line into turn 3, and they continue to go side by side. This is what we wanted to see here at the Bend. That's what these sorts of sequences of corners were made for, and it looks like Zach Baker will stay ahead there as he goes through the fastest corner on the racetrack down into turn number 6. And Zach Baker keeping that position there. So Thomas Paul in 8th place. Jack Handel doing a fantastic job in his first Automobilista Supercars Championship race in 9th place. And Colin Warwick has climbed into the top 10.
I was about to mention that incredible effort from Colin Warwick. He was down in 23rd, as we mentioned, during the first lap. We're now halfway through lap 5, and he's managed to halve that deficit down to 10th position. So incredible work for him. Just going through that, what I believe is a treacherous bit of corner there. He's managed to negotiate it properly, but that is the part of the circuit that was the downfall of Will Devonish and Nigel Marneef. So hopefully not. Oh, as we got Jack Handel ahead of him in 9th place, has had he got an incredible swapper on. He almost held onto it. It was incredibly close, but just wasn't quite able to do so. So he's looped himself around. He's only dropped down to 11th position though, so that will be cold comfort. But still, he didn't lose too many positions, and he's within sight of Wayne Carr, who is up 5 positions from his start into the top 10.
So that's dropped Jack Handel down into 11th place, putting him under pressure from Aidan Schultz, who has the number 11 on his car, and that's an indication of the position that he would like to relinquish from Jack Handel. Jack Handel doing a good job even despite that mistake in this race, considering it's his first race now. Jake Moloney having a move on Mark Pickett. They go side by side through turn 6, and he was starting to close that gap in, but now Mark Pickett has the inside for the next few corners. There's a lot of very quick, fast right-hand corners here, and Mark Pickett is a little bit offline. He goes a little bit wide though, but he gets it back for the apex there and manages to stay ahead but that has all of a sudden brought Kurt Stenberg back into it. They gapped Kurt a little bit, and in fact, Sean Allen may be having a look at these guys battling and thinking he can start to close the gap as well. So Mark Pickett coming under renewed pressure for that second place.
Yeah, that was, as we switched to it, it was in the middle of Jake Moloney having a huge dive that it so nearly came off. It was incredibly clean, very good braking to pull it up in time. Kurt Stenberg, who was sort of falling away from his teammate, this has brought him right back into the fray, as he is now under 0.3 of a second behind his teammate Jake Moloney, going through the penultimate corner. This is going to be a. I feel for Mark Pickett, because he is currently the head of what is going to be a huge slipstream caterpillar all the way down this incredibly long start-finish straight. He moves straight over to the inside to defend and try to break that slipstream, and begins weaving back across the track. It looks as if Jake Moloney's not going to have the pace to get up alongside. Kurt Stenberg had to think about it. Oh, he's done it! He's gone down the inside. He's too deep stairs.
Yeah, he tried a very, very dive from a very, very long way back, and it would have been an incredible move if he had managed to get the car stopped. But there was absolutely no way he was going to do that, and he was very lucky indeed not to let Kurt Stenberg through. But he's very close here, coming through turn 5, and close enough to have a bit of a look down into turn 6. But Mark Pickett is not going to be fooled twice. And bit of contact there. Was there contact? Did he spin around on his own? It's very, very bad news for Jake Moloney, who's dropping down further beyond 5th and into 6th place, with Brody Steen already coming up. Let's have a look at the replay there. Big moment in this race, and indeed this championship. He was already on his way round. There was no contact there with the teammate. Kurt Stenberg had a front row seat to that mistake there from Jake Moloney.
And it's getting worse. He's just flung himself off the track. I wonder if that is... I reckon that might be the same bit of track that put an end to Will Devonish and Nigel Marneef's races, in which case it might not be his fault, or I could just be... No, it looks like I'm entirely wrong. He is just...
Tyres are overheating.
Tyres are gone, and he's probably pushing a bit because he's frustrated, and just straight off the track down into 9th place, so barely keeping a toe grip on the top 10 at the moment, while his championship rival Kurt Stenberg is now shaping up on Mark Pickett for that second spot on the podium, as we've got Colin Warwick climbed back up to... It's taken him a long time, but he's back where he started in 8th place, so it's all upwards from here, hopefully, for Colin Warwick.
Yeah, he's got 5 seconds to Brody Steen up in 7th place. 5 laps left in this race as we passed the halfway point not too long ago, and that doesn't give Jake Moloney a lot of time to recover. Incidentally, the man up ahead of him is the guy who's also on a bit of a recovery drive, Colin Warwick. So if you want to make your mistake... Oh, Jake, he's had another moment. He's dropped down to 11th.
He's in the pits.
So that's a huge surprise to see him coming into the pit lane, seemingly voluntarily.
Oof.
Is he changing tyres?
He's DNF.
He's retired from the race. Jake Moloney is out. Sensation. And that is going to hand Kurt Stenberg a huge lead in the Drivers' Championship.
Unless his tyres were just so completely spent from those couple of big moments he had, I don't see why you'd do that. A DNF costs you so much in this championship, and he's already got 3 of them to his name. Make that 4, and Kurt Stenberg currently looking at yet another podium to extend his points lead over Jake Moloney, and it could even be worse, depending on how Kurt Stenberg goes up against Mark Pickett as they're coming towards the start-finish straight. Mark Pickett's tyres are looking a little bit old. He's getting a little bit squirrely under throttle, whereas Kurt Stenberg is just slowly reeling him in. He's now about half a second behind him as they go through the penultimate corner. I just don't understand why you would voluntarily pull into the pits and retire, Stairs. I just don't understand.
No, it's very perplexing indeed, and it is certainly a tale of two drivers. This championship, which has seesawed a number of times already, looks like it's very much in favour of Kurt Stenberg at the moment, but of course there is a very, very long way to go with the Enduros, and anything can happen in those, but it's a lot of points to chuck up against the wall for Jake Moloney. He's won 7 races in this championship. Kurt Stenberg's only won one. And that just goes to show how different their championships have gone, because Kurt Stenberg will be well clear at the head of the championship after this race, even if he finishes where he is now in third. He has a bit of a lock up there at turn 6, not close enough to put Mark Pickett under any significant pressure on that occasion. He's doing a stellar job in second place.
Yeah, his last lap was just a shade faster than Mark Pickett. Mark Pickett was a 151.0 and Kurt Stenberg was a 150.8. So he is reeling him in slowly. Oh, as Mark Pickett has a little bit of a slide but catches it. He is reeling him in. He's only got the 3 laps, well, 2.5 laps to make this position up. He might just be able to wear the less experienced driver down with consistent pressure. He is right on the back of him as we're coming into the last sector of the race, going through those the Cooper mild corners, as I like to call them. I've just decided to coin that due to the Cooper mild hoarding on the wall there. Going through the penultimate corner, and a big lock-up from Mark Pickett. But Mark Pickett does seem to have a bit more straight line speed down the start-finish straight, so that slipstream isn't as effective as it might be against another driver, but we're going to get to see if Kurt Stenberg wants to promote himself onto the second step of the podium.
Yeah, that's why that we've seen some of these drivers try and don a scuba suit for an almighty dive, trying to overtake Mark Pickett. Mark Pickett doesn't really need to be breaking the toe so aggressively as he's been trying to do, because he seems to have the straight line speed. Big mistake there for Mark Pickett. He gets it all swapped up, and it was a mammoth effort to recover that. He did a stellar job and may well just hold on to the second place, but Kurt Stenberg is all over the back of him as they go through turn 5 and close enough to have a dive. Mark Pickett went to the inside. He knew that Kurt was going to have a go there, and that's very good defensive driving from Mark.
It is very, very different lines there from Kurt Stenberg, who goes very deep, locks his tyres a little bit, but comes out the corner the same distance behind him, behind Mark Pickett as he was going into it. This is very, very tense racing here for the relative newbie compared to Kurt Stenberg in the main series. Kurt Stenberg might be having to go up the inside. No, just not enough pace off the exit of the corner, but he has been under 0.2 of a second this entire lap, and his nose is tucked up right underneath that rear wing of Mark Pickett's car, and just the differing lines here. Kurt Stenberg seesawing from one side of the track to the other, eliciting all sorts of intakes of breath from my co-commentator Stairs to my left currently, as they're heading into the... as opposed to my right, 5 minutes ago. Currently, as they're going into the last corner. So Kurt Stenberg get another opportunity. He's got a couple more of these to try and get the job done. Very awkward exit from the last corner. Not going to be particularly quick, and indeed, Mark Pickett is currently stretching his advantage.
Once again, Mark launches out of these corners and has a great deal of straight line speed that Kurt Stenberg doesn't seem to be able to match. We saw this time 1 lap ago that Mark's tyres were starting to feel a little bit second hand with just 1 lap remaining after this one. He was much more circumspect through there on that occasion and keeps the car in check. Kurt Stenberg a couple of car lengths further back than he was on the previous lap. Look how close to the edge of the track Mark's running it. And once again, keeps the car very much on the line. He's a little bit wide out of the exit there, and that probably hurt his exit speed a little bit. You can see that Kurt's right on the tail of him, but this part of the racetrack, there's just really no way through. It's the sort of racetrack where if you're in a Formula 1 car with high downforce, you'd fall way back because you'd be in the turbulent air, because these would be downforce corners. These cars have a little bit of downforce, but not too much. But it means it's a very, very single file line through there.
Yeah, any attempt to dive down the side will probably end up in a shoulder check and being flung off into the flat rolling plains of the bend. It looks as if Kurt Stenberg's shaping up to be as close as he has ever been through the last couple of corners. His front splitter is right, basically brushing the rear wheels of Mark Pickett's car, or at least it was no longer, as they're going into the penultimate corner. That was quite close. Looks like Kurt Stenberg almost gave him a little love tap, but managed to pull out of it in time. And for the last time this race, at least for the whole length of it, they're going to tackle this straight. And it looks as if Kurt Stenberg's gotten a better exit that time around, but the gap just seems to explode in the early part of the straight. So Mark Pickett just must have some incredibly short first couple of gears to give him a launch off the corner, as you were saying last time around Stairs. Kurt Stenberg, just nothing he can do about it. He's going to have to hope that Mark Pickett is pressured into a mistake somewhere through this last lap.
The leader, Ethan Warren, is about 7 seconds ahead of them. That was 8, so that's come down a little bit in the last few moments. But he's set the fastest lap of the race of a 49.7 as Kurt Stenberg gets it all crossed up, locking up his fronts and nearly going into the back of Mark Pickett for second place. But Mark's hanging on valiantly so far. We'll try and stick with this battle as long as we can, as we've got the thick end of this race, or this lap, still to go until Ethan Warren comes across the line to take victory and announce himself as very much a genuine championship contender. Look how close he is. Kurt Stenberg almost up alongside. Rat-a-tat-tat on the back of that ZB Commodore driven by Mark Pickett, who must be exceedingly nervous. He got a third place in the first race in Queensland Raceway. He really wants to get a second place. The win is gone. Oh, bit deep. He goes deep, and that allows Kurt Stenberg up underneath him and barges through. Somehow has found room where really there wasn't any, but Mark Pickett's down the inside. He's going to try and outbrake down into the penultimate corner. There's one last chance after this one for both of them, but Mark Pickett gets his nose ahead, and he's still ahead, but he gets it all crossed up, and that's going to give Kurt Stenberg the drive down to the final corner, but Mark Pickett stays ahead. Ethan Warren wins the race, but it's a drag race here. Kurt Stenberg's got it all lit up around the final corner. That's third place for him. Mark Pickett hangs on to second. What a valiant effort from both of them. Huge end to that race.
Jesus wept. Oh God, have a drink. I believe that that was some incredibly tight racing. Just Kurt Stenberg managing to shove his way up the inside. Nothing too untoward there, I don't think, to take that second position, and then just that little bit too deep in the penultimate corner, giving Mark Pickett the run up the inside, and then just oversteering coming out of the last corner. Just nothing he could have done. We've got who have we got finishing behind? We've got Sean Allen holding on to that fourth place for Race on Oz. Very good finish for him. Zach Baker in fifth. Thomas Paul from Super 2 up into sixth place. Very well done. Colin Warwick recovering and gaining one position for his troubles, finishing in seventh position. Brody Steen, the other Race on Oz racer, in eighth. Jack Handel from Super 2 as well, in ninth position. And Wayne Carr, also from Super 2, up into the top 10. So very, very good finishes for some of our Super 2 promotees tonight.
Just the 3 DNFs, Jake Moloney, Nigel Marneef, and Will Devonish. And what a bearing on the championship that does have, with Jake Moloney getting absolutely nothing out of this race. And Kurt Stenberg, he tried for second, but I think he can be quite happy from a championship perspective to pick up the points for third place. It was looking at times like it might be not the most exciting race that we've ever had, but it certainly had a bit of sting in the tail, didn't it?
Yeah, that battle between Mark Pickett and Kurt Stenberg was a cracker. There wasn't passing every corner or anything like that, but it was just it was very close, very clean racing. And even when Jake Moloney was involved, that 3-car scrap was a delight to behold. So probably won't look like it if you look at the timing screens, because there'll be a couple of seconds between Kurt Stenberg and second place man Mark Pickett, but they were line astern for the solid majority of that last half of the race. And Ethan Warren, just dominant. Just never looked like he was in doubt for that win. Mark Pickett tried to put him under a bit of pressure early on, but not really anything he was able to do. So excellent work from Ethan Warren to take out that win.
So with that third place finish from Kurt Stenberg, he extends his championship lead from 36 points to 165. And Ethan Warren wins his third race in 4 starts. That's an incredible stat.
That is an excellent stat, yeah. Fantastic work. If you look at Ethan Warren's recent record from the past 4 weekends, not including tonight. We've got second, first, 11th, which is the outlier, first, second, and then tonight so far first. So you weren't wrong, Stairs, earlier when you were saying if he had been around for a few more races, he would be right up there. As it is, he's not too distant a 5th place currently.
And I still think with the drop round and the Enduros coming up that he could possibly figure. Looking at his results, his worst result since Winton was that 11th place in Townsville, and that was a race where he had pole position and he was fighting for the win until he got, if anyone remembers that race, a number of drive-through penalties which cost him very, very dearly in the end there, and that could have been a lot more points than it ended up being.
Absolutely. Got Kurt Stenberg saying in chat, that's the hardest Aussie track I think I've ever raced on, which I'm hoping that's a good thing. Good and challenging to race around. Lots of switchbacks and corners where you have to be on your toes because someone will have a go to put the scuba suit on, as you said, and fling themselves down the inside. Just hoping that I was wrong with that bit of track that I thought caused some errors for Will Devonish and Nigel Marneef. It might have just been some driver error, but still, it'll be something to watch out for in race 2, Stairs, which isn't far away.
Yes, but first we've got the matter of qualifying for race 2 and scheduled for 8:45 Eastern, but we're a little bit behind schedule, as is to be expected, quite frankly, given we've got a fair bit of stuff to get sorted out. Kurt Stenberg saying it's kind of like Phillip Island and Oran Park had a baby. It's an interesting description. It's I don't know, Phillip Island and Oran Park have a little bit more soul, I think, than this racetrack. Not to say that the Bend may not have soul in the future, but I guess it's something that a racetrack develops over time, but it's just the fact that it's in the middle of bloody nowhere that it's a bit difficult to love it straight away.
It's a little bit like Malala like that, where it's kind of very far from anything that you would possibly want to visit, apart from possibly old Tailem Town, which let's be honest, is a cultural institution for Adelaideans.
Do go.
Absolutely do go. But as we were talking about it earlier, it kind of just it looks too fresh and it looks too new. So hopefully, with a couple of decades of history behind it, it'll be a little bit less. I don't want to say boring to look at or to consider, but it'll be more. There'll be more to it, Stairs.
But at the risk of contradicting what we've just said, when you're booking your tickets to Adelaide next year and writing down in your itinerary, visiting the Bend Supercars event, and also penciling in some time to visit Old Tailem Town, do look forward to it with gusto. And tell your friends about it because, well, you know, it's good for South Australia to have 2 races in a calendar year.
It is. It's very nice, and it's very nice for Adelaide, well, South Australia to have a purpose-built track that isn't, you know, part of Wakefield Road and the steps and stuff that people basically just complain about when it happens, rather than appreciating it for the wonderful event that it is. Well, I feel like we're getting a little bit. If people don't live in Adelaide, this is all going to fall completely on deaf ears.
Well, for those of you viewers who aren't from Adelaide, I'd like to tell a story about the Adelaide City Council, who was within the last 5 years thought they might resurrect the Australian Grand Prix, which was unceremoniously pinched from us by Melbourne in 1996, and then subsequently the hosting rights for Formula One went up by approximately 700,000%, and so there's no way in God's green earth that Adelaide could possibly afford to host the Grand Prix anymore. Adelaide City Council sort of thought of it like an afterthought. So, what was that thing? What was that thing? The Grand Prix. We used to have that. Let's try and get that back, shall we? And I think when they saw what it would cost to do that, the idea was very, very swiftly dismissed, I think is the word.
I think, yeah, that's a very good word for it, is dismissed. And of course we had what was an international institution in the Adelaide Motor Festival, or the Adelaide Motorsport Festival, that has since had its funding completely cut by the South Australian government. So come on, South Aussie, come on. We still have a pretty. I think we still have there's a parade on Grote Street or something of all old cars and stuff that'll still be happening, but the actual event itself at Victoria Park with all the cars and people doing little sprint races and stuff, and all the old Formula One cars that they'd somehow managed to finagle down here won't be going ahead. So it's a bit of a sad time.
Yeah, they probably spent all their money on the promotional video. I don't know how much you have to pay Ivan Capelli to break out the acting gear, but anyway, nonetheless, that's what they did. And
I'm going to Adelaide.
I kid. It's always a bit of fun, but of course, the attendance, I suppose, wasn't enough to recoup the losses. That was a depressing tangent we went through. Qualifying's about to get going, and we can put to bed the unhealth, for lack of a better term, of motorsport at a grassroots level in South Australia, and move very swiftly on.
Absolutely, I look forward to it. We've missed a few comments here in the chat. Just Kurt Stenberg saying, the Sean saying it's not his favourite track to race, and it's strange. It feels very lazy. He referring to the track itself, which I can understand that. And Kurt Stenberg saying he agrees with it not being his favourite track to race. It doesn't feel like a real track, which seems strange considering that it is a real track. Yeah, and Mitchell Hathaway just saying that they're going to have something similar at the Bend to the Motorsport Festival, I assume. So yes. That's handy to know.
My issue with the racetrack is that it's too long. We have so many racetracks in supercars that are short, and they produce hectic action. It's fantastic to watch. But those of us familiar with the track map, the track map that we showed earlier in the broadcast just before race 1, which was divided into the 3 sectors. The second sector, you can't actually access it anywhere as a spectator. It's really only for the benefit of TV. So I think if you were at the racetrack itself, you'd want turn 5 and turn 14 to connect up with one another, and then you'd get to see the cars more often and more frequently. It would be very, very much more often. More frequently means the same thing, but you know where I'm going with this.
I absolutely understand. I believe this is the layout that we, when we went to spectate about a month and a half ago, or 2 months ago even, for the Australian GT Shannon's Nationals weekend. It was the first time I'd been there. I'd never really watched any of it. Tonight, honestly, is the first time that I've understood how that second sector goes, because as we were parked on the infield, and even then you still can't see most of it. It's incredibly odd, and I'm imagining that when they use the full layout with that bit across the northern end as well, I'm imagining there's no seating or grandstands out there either. So, what is the point?
Yeah, if I was to design a racetrack, first of all, I would get a 3-year-old child to scribble something on an envelope, and now I put the entire circuit on a 45-degree angle opposite a grandstand, so you could see the cars at every possible opportunity. And you can imagine how difficult that would be, with the cars fighting against the angle of, the angle of retention? That'd be fantastic.
I do like that idea. It's got something of a Mario Kart vibe to it. Mitchell Hathaway saying he was flagging at T13 and it was like a ghost town. That does not surprise me in the least.
Well, let us go down there. If we could go down to turn 13, we would.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. While we've been talking about this, I think we've missed a few people starting their hot laps for this second qualifying session. We haven't really talked much about the race itself. We've been sort of just ranting about South Australianisms for the last 15 minutes.
It's all right because the racetrack, I mean, it takes about as long as it took Apollo to get to the moon than it takes for the drivers to get through the first sector split. So we still don't have anything to go on from our live timing screen.
Absolutely fantastic. Didn't know you were a South Aussie Mitchell Hathaway, so lovely to hear that. Looking forward to your company at the Suzuka 3 Hours. Subtle plug for anyone listening who...
September 15th.
September 15th. Definitely not September 11th. We will be doing 3 hours at Suzuka in AJR Metal Moro prototype cars. Grab a friend, come along and do some wacky racing. Not too wacky.
No, not too wacky. We're starting to get some times come through. The fastest first sector time currently has been set by Mark Pickett, who is one of 5 drivers to set a first sector time. That's been surpassed by Ethan Warren, though, and he's been absolutely in a class of his own all night. We'll try and pick up Mark Pickett. Oh, and he's caught traffic on his lap. That's very, very unfortunate. Coming up to the penultimate corner, and Stephen Birchall, who is also on a flying lap, so he wasn't obliged to relinquish positions, so it's just unfortunate sometimes if you don't make the gap. Of all the tracks to have traffic, you wouldn't have thought this would be the one, but Mark Pickett sets the benchmark of a 50.1 as Ethan Warren sets the fastest middle sector.
Yeah, you've got approximately the Nürburgring to get around a lap of the Bend, so it's incredible that people are managing to find other cars on track. Kurt Stenberg, fastest at the moment, although that has immediately been ripped away from him by Ethan Warren, who's gone 0.7 of a second faster. Incredible lap time. Who else have we got coming through? We have David Nenadick in second place. No, that's very out of date, Live Races. What are you doing to me? It's only just updated with Kurt Stenberg's time, which happened quite a while ago. Have we got Jake Moloney back in the server as yet? Doesn't look like it. So let's hope that he re-emerges, because we definitely don't need... we definitely want him up there trying to fight back for that podium, or sorry, fight back for that championship lead.
Sign language is not our forte. I was just trying to see if Jake Moloney was in the server from our other monitor, but it doesn't look like he's appeared in Live Races, so if he's not in at the start of qualifying, my understanding of the rule is that he won't be allowed to participate. So even if he does join, he will be starting from the back of the grid, which is another huge moment in this championship.
Yeah, he won't be allowed car, since his car will not be on, as it was either. That bow hurt my arm to draw back that far, but nevertheless I did it. Mark Pickett, currently up in third place, although he's just abandoned that lap. Probably got another one hot lap in his time if he pits and gets straight back out again. Few of the Super 2 guys up there. Thomas Poole currently in fourth, and that's the only one. Never mind.
Ethan Warren's continued around for a second flying lap, which is quite interesting, and he has improved by a quarter of a second. So he'll only get around. Is he allowed to do it? I don't think he is allowed to exit back to the pits. He has to do a full in lap, which means that he won't have time to do another out lap. So that's Ethan Warren. He showed his hand early, and because he's done 2 laps in a row, he won't have time for another flying lap.
And Sean Allen has just rocketed himself up into second place with he bettered his lap time by 0.6. Still the better part of a second down on Ethan Warren, which just goes to show how fast that man is. But Sean Allen currently looking good for race on Oz in second place. Kurt Stenberg, I imagine, is on his in lap, but that means that he won't be able to set any, or he possibly on his out lap. It's hard to tell, but he will not be able to set a another fast lap if this is in fact his his in-lap, although he has picked up the pace, so it could possibly be an out-lap. He's trying to warm up his tyres.
I'd say it's an outlap because essentially you only get 2 laps because there's only time. Even if you do 2 flying laps, as soon as you possibly can, you won't have time for a 3rd lap unless you do the 3 laps in a row. So I think it makes sense to do your first flying lap, come in, and then do your second flying lap so that you have the freshest possible tyres for both laps.
Or do you fuel up and then just and just try to punch out as many laps as you can as he gets out of the way, I think, there for Zach Baker, who was getting the blue flags, I believe. Zach Baker currently in 5th and not looking like improving, so it's a shame for him. Kurt Stenberg now into the last sector of the track. Yeah, so he will be doing his second and final flying lap as he comes across the line. Sean Allen has bailed into the pits, so he will not be improving his lap time any. Ethan Warren, as we said, already in the pits. Mark Pickett will be doing another hot lap by the looks of it. He crosses the line to start it. And Kurt Stenberg coming around the last corner. So let's keep our eyes on these two, Mark Pickett and Kurt Stenberg, see if they can make any inroads on the juggernaut that is Ethan Warren.
Well, so far, Ethan Warren has most of a second as an advantage over Sean Allen, who will not be improving as he sits in the pits as well. So just 5 men set in the pits: Ethan Warren, Sean Allen, Jack Handel, Stephen Birchall, and Aidan Schultz. So everyone else on the racetrack. But of course, it is a very, very long racetrack indeed. So they have managed to space themselves out this time, although they are mostly in the first sector at the moment, with the exception of David Nenadic. Mark Pickett is not looking like he's going to improve on this particular lap. Let's see whether Kurt Stenberg can make any inroads on his personal best. He's 0.5 of a second off, so he's got it all to do. And the gap between himself and Sean Allen is only, well, it's less than 1/10 of a second, so he doesn't need to find much. It is a very, very long racetrack, so there will be ample opportunity to do so.
Yeah, definitely. He's not even halfway through the second sector now. Just an incredibly long track. Mark Pickett definitely not going to improve, I'd say, based off his second sector, 0.3 down on his best time. So eyes now go to Kurt Stenberg, who is still about 0.07 of a second down on his PB. He's actually lost a little bit of time since the first sector split. So it's going to be tight. If he's going to improve, he's going to have to pull it all out in this last couple of corners. Probably get a very good exit off the last corner onto that very, very long start-finish straight. Don't get the full benefit of it, obviously, since the line is about halfway down. But regardless, it is a very fast part of the track. Decent run through there. Looks like he got onto the throttle nice and early. Don't know if it's going to do anything for him. It doesn't. He improves by 0.03, which is not enough to put him above Sean Allen, who is still 0.04 of a second faster than him at the end of the session.
And Mark Pickett got pipped at the end by Zach Baker, and Thomas Paul, so it drops to 6th in the end. And that must be incredibly frustrating because they both beat him by less than 1/10 of a second. So great job from Thomas Paul, another one of our recent recruits. And Mark Pickett backing up from his podium finish with another top 10 qualifying performance to start in 6th place. He probably would have been more happy if it had been a bit higher up in 2nd where he started race 1, but 6th is still nothing to sneeze at. Brody Steen will start in 7th place. David Nenadic 8th, Will Devonish in 9th, and Jack Handel rounds out the top 10.
Yeah, interesting top 10 that's going to be. I reckon Kurt Stenberg has more pace than Sean Allen, although I say that the last couple of laps of QR would suggest otherwise, as Sean Allen managed to hold him very well for the last step on the podium. But I reckon over the course of a race, Kurt Stenberg's got a good opportunity to take that 2nd place. Ethan Warren, well, can anyone do anything about him at this stage? A second faster in qualifying. It's going to be one hell of an effort to catch him in the race, I think. I don't want to say that it's impossible, and we know that the Warrens have a tendency of of pushing a bit too hard sometimes, so maybe that'll occur. But my goodness, and no Jake Moloney stairs unless he joins now.
Yeah, he has to get in during this warm-up session in order to make the race, but he will be starting from the back of the grid if he does so. But it is a fantastic opportunity for Kurt Stenberg to increase his championship lead. And Ethan Warren, you say he's made a few mistakes. The Warren brothers are known every now and then for pushing a little bit too hard, but if anything, his recent results in the last few weeks have certainly implied to me, at least, that he is a man who is getting ever more consistent, and that is a very, very ominous thing for the rest of the grid. Well, we've got a few minutes left before race 2 starts. We're going to have a quick break. On the other side, we'll bring you all the action. Don't go anywhere.
Our live coverage of the Automobilista Supercars Championship will be back shortly. For more information about the Automobilista Supercars Championship, including race results and official championship points, don't forget to visit the Automobilista Supercars Facebook and Instagram pages for all the latest news and results. To enhance your watching experience, you can follow all of the live timing for each race at rsmclanau.liveraces.com.
Welcome to the previous round recap, brought to you by Apex Rear Wing. The 9th round of the Automobilista Supercars Championship took us to Queensland Raceway for the Ipswich SuperSprint. It was the championship leader Jake Moloney who took pole position for race 1, but Ethan Warren got the better start, with Moloney's new TTR teammate Kurt Stenberg starting from the rear of the grid. By lap 6, Stenberg had managed to get into the top 10 and had a nice battle with Matt Lepoitovan over 9th place. Meanwhile, at the front, Ethan Warren and Jake Moloney were having a great battle. But technical dramas would ruin the race for us, as an apparent connection issue dropped him out of the server. Despite a big mistake at turn 6, Kurt Stenberg had the rub of the green, continuing to make progress into the top 10 and putting himself in a position to recapture the lead of the championship. Meanwhile, Thomas McMillan and Zach Baker had a terrific tussle for 4th place, which looked like it might be decided in favour of Zach Baker until a spin at turn 3 for him saw it all go up in smoke, the mistake putting Kurt Stenberg up 1 more place. Back at the front, Ethan Warren had a blissfully lonely race, winning his 4th race of the year by 8 seconds over Sean Allen and Mark Pickett, who started his ASC career in fine form with a podium finish in his very first race. For race 2, Jake Moloney claimed another pole position, and not wishing to break tradition, Ethan Warren claimed the spot alongside him. This time though, it would be Jake Moloney who would lead out of turn 1 with plenty of action in behind. Ethan donned his scuba suit for lap 2 and had a huge dive at turn 3, but Moloney saw him coming and resisted the attack. After regrouping, Ethan had reeled Moloney back in and executed a much more precise manoeuvre and grabbed the lead of the race. Behind the leaders, Thomas McMillan was doing a stellar job holding off a big pack of cars for the final spot on the podium. It didn't take long for the battle to get heated, and a bit of bumping and barging brought a bunch of others into the fight. While the melee in the mid-pack raged on, Moloney returned serve on Ethan Warren. Recovering from an earlier off, Thomas McMillan found himself in the wars again, getting a punt from Zach Baker, and was fortunate not to collect Kurt Stenberg as he exited stage right. It looked like it was Kurt's night, as a spin from Mark Pickett at the next corner promoted him up another position to 4th. By the time the pit stop started shaking out, Ethan Warren had managed to reclaim the lead from Jake Moloney in the arm wrestle that was this race. With Jake staying out a couple of laps longer than Ethan, he managed to effect an overcut which saw him rejoin ahead and with newer tyres. Kurt Stenberg was eager to relieve Sean Allen of his final spot on the podium, but Allen was having none of it, with the two fighting fiercely. Jake Moloney righted the wrong of race 1 to grab the victory from Ethan Warren, and Sean Allen held off the challenge from the new championship leader Kurt Stenberg.
Welcome back to round 10 of the Automobilista Supercars Championship from the Bend. We're about to get started on race 2, 21 laps or 100 kilometres around this 4.95 kilometre anti-clockwise circuit. Fuel burn is around about 7 litres per lap. which means that we will have a pit window somewhere between laps 4 and 16. Quite a wide variety of options available to the drivers in terms of strategy, but we did see some drivers seemingly struggling with their tyres during that first race, didn't we, Madbird?
We did. Jake Moloney, the obvious example, who seemed to DNF as a result of his tyres just going off a cliff with 1 or 2 spins. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle a race that's almost twice as long. It feels like 21 laps doesn't feel like that big an increase over 12 laps, but Jesus, they're long laps. Sean Allen has replied to me in the live chat just saying he agrees that Kurt has more pace than him, but Kurt does have to pass Sean, and I completely agree. The last half of second half of the last race of our DRM season was me much slower than Brendan Foley, clinging on for dear life to the last step on the podium, and I have great respect for a man that can keep a man behind him, make his car as wide as a barge. So you do that, brother. You hold on to that position. I look forward to watching it.
And Sean Allen has experience with keeping Kurt Stenberg behind him. He is one who Kurt Stenberg is probably quite familiar with in recent races. We've seen those two battle quite a lot, and, well, what can we say? Sean Allen is one of the last of the late breakers. He's an absolute demon on that middle pedal, so let's see whether he can replicate that once more, hold on to that second place. It remains to be seen whether he can up the challenge for Ethan Warren, though he would appear to be in a class of his own, Ethan Warren.
He definitely would do, as he's starting from the front of the grid. We've got a couple of people still yet to grid up. Where is Zach Baker? Hope he hurries up. He wants to get out there and claim that 4th position. There he does. All right, he got there in the end. Thank goodness. As we have...
Sorry, Jake Moloney has made the grid. He'll be starting out of 17th place, so that's very, very good news for the championship.
Absolutely. That's good news for us as well, because we get to watch Jake Moloney scythe his way up through the field, but at the polar opposite of the field where Jake Moloney would like to be, we had Ethan Warren just completely dominated the first race, was never looking in doubt for the race win. Sean Allen with a very good qualifying time, pipping Kurt Stenberg for 2nd position on the grid. Kurt Stenberg obviously wanting to make hay while the sun shines, the sun shining being Jake Moloney not being in a decent position. Looked like he wasn't going to be in the race at all, so it would be, the sun is already setting slightly for Kurt Stenberg. Zach Baker in 4th position with a very good qualifying lap from him onto the 2nd row of the grid. Thomas Paul from the Super 2 category, very, very good qualifying up into 5th place, top 5 on the grid. Mark Pickett, who after the highs of race 1 where he started in 3rd and held on to 2nd in the end, he has started this race down in 6th place. Just a few people pipping him at the post the last minute or two of the qualifying session. Brody Steen, Sean Allen's teammate, not joining him on the front row of the grid, but joining him in the top 10, starting in 7th with David Nanadick behind him, Zach Baker's teammate for company in 8th. Will Devonish has returned after his DNF in the first race, starting from 9th with Jack Handel, another one of the Super 2 runners, starting from 10th on the grid. Ozrob, Will Devonish's teammate, starting in 11th, joined by Jay Borg for the Stealth Penrite Racing team, Colin Warwick's team. Termo in 13th with Stephen Birchall in the Monster Mustang Racing. I think that's the first time I've said that without stuttering over my words. Mustang down in 14th place. Wayne Carr, another one of the Super 2 runners, in 15th. Colin Warwick starting from 16th, so I don't know if we saw what happened there. Must have just not managed to get a decent lap time in during qualifying. He is starting out of 16th, joined by Jake Moloney, who is another runner that we would expect to see much higher up, but did not get into qualifying in time to set a time. And Aiden Schultz rounding out our grid in 18th position. Got a couple more people joining in on the chat. We've got Resist from our Apex Rear Wing League saying, first time watcher, good luck or show me how to get good. You'd be wanting to watch the front end of the grid here for Ethan Warren for some tips on that. But Sean Allen and Kurt Stenberg and Zach Baker, the other 3 runners on the first 2 rows of the grid, definitely got some stuff to show you as well.
And also shout out to Brian Walsh, Mr. Walshy73, an old friend from Automobilista Supercars, watching along. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy race 2 here at the Bend. We're almost gridded up. We're about to get racing. The revs are about to rise. The lights are about to come on, and the lights are about to go off. They were held for a long time, but it's a pretty good launch there from Ethan Warren. And look at Kurt Stenberg. They fan out 3 wide. Ethan Warren, the second phase of the start was horrible for him. And look at them all over the track. Your guess is as good as mine about who's going to arrive first in the first. Oh, someone's disappeared from the racetrack. Is there a bit of lag? I wonder. I think it's a disconnection from someone. We'll wait and see. But Kurt Stenberg is leading the race. So Ethan Warren in the end recovered to second after it looked like he might get swamped down to about 4th or 5th. So what a start.
Absolutely incredible start. That car that we saw lagging out and disappearing was Mark Pickett, who's down into 18th. That is incredibly bad luck for him. He was, as we've got Ethan Warren taking the lead back from Kurt Stenberg, but Kurt Stenberg got the inside through the next corner. He's going to hold on to it because there's a couple more right-handers to follow. Kurt Stenberg quite comfortable there, but it looks as if Ethan Warren's trying to go up the inside, and we've got someone spun out in the background. Sean Allen down into 13th, 14th place from his start in second place. That is bitterly disappointing. Kurt Stenberg holding on to this fight.
Ethan Warren's managed to get up the inside though, and he has taken the lead from Kurt Stenberg. Kurt Stenberg, well, if that was a sharper corner, he may well have tried to outbrake him, but the braking zone in that corner is pretty slow. Thomas Paul up how many spots off the start? Into 3rd place. Terrific, and he's caught right up to the back. He started in 5th place, and he's right on the back of this lead battle.
Absolutely. As before that battle consumed my mind, Mark Pickett, I was saying, currently down in 18th and suffering a lot of lag issues by the look of it. He had an incredible start and was alongside Ethan Warren, looking like he was going to pip him for 3rd place coming out of turn 1. But then those lag issues struck, and he has now been relegated down into 18th and has disappeared from our screens again. So very bad luck there for Mark Pickett.
Yeah, commiserations to Mark.
He's out.
He becomes the first retirement of this race. That's very, very unfortunate. Unlike race 1, everything has kicked off at the start of this race. The beginning of race 1, we saw pretty much everyone as they started. We've got all sorts of action going on. Jake Moloney has made his way up to 6th place somehow. Let's catch you up on the top 10. Kurt Stenberg is in 2nd. He's starting to drop away from Ethan Warren. Thomas Paul in 3rd. David Nenadic up 4 spots from where he started, is holding down 4th place from his teammate Zach Baker. And Jake Moloney is on the back of them. That didn't take him very, very long at all. He's up 11 spots. Brody Steen is behind him. Jay Borg in 8th. Termo in 9th, but about to lose the spot there to Colin Warwick, who's got all sorts of out of shape and crashed into him at the hairpin at turn 6. Well, the top 10 is a work in progress. We'll get back to that. Huge moment, though, in this championship. Jake Moloney recovering from the back of the grid up into 6th place.
It's absolutely ridiculous. I thought that was a timing screen glitch as I was scrolling through our runners. Up 11 spots from where he started. Granted, a few of them would have been down the start-finish straight. He would have had a much better start compared to those cars around him. But still, that is an incredible amount of. We're not even finished the second lap yet, and he's already basically cut his deficit completely away. He's right on the back of the 2 Zach Baker racing cars, which are scrapping amongst themselves. Zach Baker would be quite annoyed, I would imagine, that he has lost a position off the start to his teammate, who started down in 8th position. Zach Baker started in 4th, now down into 5th, and Jake Moloney all over the back of him. So I imagine that these positions are going to change.
Oh! Huge pile up at the penultimate corner. Hard to see who caused that, but there was a Stealth Penrite car involved. Was that Colin Warwick? And he seems to be the biggest loser out of that event. Let's see what happened. I believe there was cars trying to, it was almost 3 wide there, and it was Colin Warwick trying to overtake Jack, what's his name? Jack Handel. I beg your pardon. Had a huge mental blank there, and unfortunately just got into the side there, spun around, and the cars were so compacted there that everyone just piled into the back of everyone.
And while that's been happening, Jake Moloney has gotten past both the Zach Baker racing cars. He's just slungshot himself up the inside of David Nenedick. That is a particular move that he practiced a few times last race against Mark Pickett, and he's managed to pull it off on the Zach Baker racing car of David Nenedick. Up into 4th place, only 2 cars behind his championship rival Kurt Stenberg, who is dropping away at an incredible rate of knots from his teammate, from Ethan Warren. Last lap around, Ethan Warren's time was a 1:49.5, and Kurt Stenberg, last lap, doesn't actually have a lap time on there, so he must have had a track cut or something. But regardless, Jake Moloney up 13 spots into 4th place. Mark Pickett just jumping in to say, computer shat itself, gents. So that is incredibly disappointing, mate. Condolences to you and commiserations, mate.
And Greg G-Tuz suggesting that the racetrack is about as scenic as the real thing. Well, the good thing about a racetrack that in real life has no discernible features is that it's not too hard to replicate in real life. But Ethan Warren, similar to his performance in race 1, is checking out at the front. He has an advantage of 3 seconds over Kurt Stenberg, who also is beginning to gap Thomas Paul, who'll be looking at his mirrors more than anything. Last lap around for Thomas Paul was 51.2, and Jake Moloney, well, 51.7, not quite a representative time from him yet, because he had to overtake 2 cars on that previous lap. And the 2 Zach Baker racing cars are still line astern, so Jake Moloney passing those 2 cars has not made any difference at all to the proximity between those 2 cars.
Definitely not. Last time around, Ethan Warren was a clear second faster than Kurt Stenberg. So that is why that gap is ballooning, now out to 3.2 seconds. So that is going to drop Kurt Stenberg very quickly back into the clutches of Jake Moloney once Jake Moloney gets past Thomas Paul, which I don't want to say is a foregone conclusion. We haven't seen Thomas Paul, fighting in the trenches as it was. So he might be a Sean Allen in that he is very good at defending. Speaking of Sean Allen, after his early spin, he has climbed his way back up into 9th position, although he's just recovering from an adventure off the track, which I'm sure Will Devonish will want to gobble that 9th position up, but just not fast enough to get onto him before the corner. Resist just saying in the chat there that he's been there in regards to Mark Pickett's computer crapping itself. Resist, of course, dropping out of one of our DRM races due to the power going out. So it's a cruel thing about sim racing. I guess it's sort of mirrors real life racing, where something can go wrong with the car that's completely out of your control as the driver, and you've got no... Oh my goodness, that was Ozrob.
Yeah, big crash there with Ozrob. It was just happening in the foreground of our shot there, the penultimate corner, and Aiden Schultz was the man who was on his tail trying to make the move, but I think Ozrob may have done that on his own. He did, and Aiden Schultz, unfortunately, in the wrong place at the wrong time, and already the rear tyres starting to go away for some of these guys, only 5 laps into this race.
Yeah, they're not lasting very long, that's for sure. I remember last time out, Jake Moloney just had 1 or 2 big spins, and his tyres seemed to completely melt. So definitely a tyre-heavy circuit by the looks of it. They are a lot of fast sweeping corners, as you said. It would be a downforce. Track if these cars were based off downforce, which luckily they're not for us, because it means that we get the racing like we're seeing here between the 2 Zach Baker racing guys. They've been line astern for several laps. Zach Baker very keen to take that 5th position off of his teammate. And Brian Walsh there just saying that the Bend is fighting with Malalar for the best permanent circuit in SA. I haven't been to Malalar, but I imagine it is similarly desolate.
Well, similarly to the GT race that we saw at the Bend in August, there weren't too many entrants in that particular battle. So, to be the 2nd best racetrack in South Australia is not saying much.
Absolutely. And I guess you can't really include what is basically just some city streets that you stick some bollards up on to say, no, don't go all the way down Rundle, mate. Badness lay that way. Zach Baker shaping up for a overtake here on his teammate. Jumps out at the very last second and pulls it up. Oh, almost pulls it up. He does pull it up. A little bit of a lock-up right at the end of the tail end of the braking zone, but manages to stop it in time. So he is finally, after about 4 or 5 laps, I reckon, he has managed to get that position back and can now set about chasing after Jake Moloney, who is now 3.7 seconds up the road from him. Thomas Paul still 1.2 seconds over Jake Moloney. That gap is coming down. Last time around, Thomas Paul was a 151.1, and last time Jake Moloney was a 151.0. So not pulling out the incredible lap times I'd be expecting from Jake Moloney.
It was a great passing manoeuvre there from Zach Baker, and now all of a sudden David Nenadic is looking in his mirrors again because Brody Steen has been closing in on these two while they've been fighting, and was 0.7 of a second faster than David Nenadic on the previous lap. So fair to say David's probably struggling a little bit more than those around him for grip, and that seems to be showing in the lap times.
It absolutely does. That gap now is under a second between Jake Moloney and I keep wanting to say MP Paul because his team is MP Sim Sports. Thomas Paul for that last step on the podium. We're not even halfway through the race and Jake Moloney is knocking on the door of the podium. Kurt Stenberg would be not particularly happy to see that in his rearview mirrors, as he has dropped now 7 seconds, or the better part thereof, behind Ethan Warren, who has just checked out basically at the front, as we expected would happen. Don't think we expected what happened at the start, where Ethan Warren got swamped into the first corner, came out of it in 3rd place, but he's quickly righted that wrong. Did we see Aiden Schultz retire? No, but he is DNF, possibly from that incident with Colin Warwick at the penultimate corner.
Yeah, may have been carrying a bit of damage there, but Colin Warwick, that wasn't Colin Warwick, that was Ozrob he collided with.
Oh, my bad.
But Ozrob is still continuing, and so too Colin Warwick, who's also been in the wars. He is currently sat in 13th place. It hasn't been, by his standards, the best night indeed. Jake Moloney has caught Thomas Paul, it's fair to say. The gap is visual. He's been closing in at a fair old rate of knots. On the previous occasion, he was 3/4 of a second faster than Thomas Paul. So Thomas is going to have his rear vision mirror absolutely full of that orange number 29, which shouldn't be orange because he's not leading the championship. But the less said about that, the better. Thomas Paul will be very, very happy with a 4th place, but he'd be even happier with a 3rd place. I don't think there are too many people betting against Jake Moloney here, though.
Definitely not. It looks as if Zach Baker's had an error somewhere, because he's dropped back into 7th position behind David Nenadic and Brody Steen, who are now fighting hotly over that 5th position. But as we say, Jake Moloney, I reckon this might be a foredrawn conclusion. Not to count Thomas Paul out completely, but Jake Moloney is incredibly out of position, and he is looking to put himself right back into position at the earliest possible opportunity. He's going to have a go down into the first corner, I reckon. Not too much of a slingshot, and not too much of a slipstream, rather, down for such a long straight, and he's not able to get it done, but he does get a slightly better run through it, continue to pressure him into a mistake.
We must be getting pretty close to the pit stops beginning to shake out, so I wonder whether, if Jake Moloney can't get this overtaking manoeuvre done very quickly, as Jack Handel has blown up his engine and flames spitting dramatically out of the back of his Commodore, and as that's happened halfway down the straight, he's got a 10-second stop and go penalty. It doesn't particularly matter because he is very much out of this race. Maybe that was why he blew his engine up. It's almost like he got the stop-go penalty and then in frustration slammed it down the gears, and thankfully for his competitors doesn't knock out the brake marker boards, because there are seldom any other markers on this racetrack to judge your braking point. And a very promising start to Jack Handel's Automobilista Supercars Championship goes up in flames, very much literally.
Absolutely. Jake Moloney has quite undramatically promoted himself up into third place. Thomas Paul, basically, it looked as if he just let him through. Went very wide at one of the corners. You've already gone past it, mate. I was just watching you hurriedly rewinding. It was coming up through one of these right-handers. He just went very, very wide into it, and it looked as if he was just, let's just get this over with, because you're not the person I'm really racing. And Jake Moloney said, well, if you say so. He just easily let himself through. So Jake Moloney up into the podium spot. He is now 4.5 seconds behind his rival, Kurt Stenberg. You can just see him going into turn 1.
Well, that's now made academic the point I was making when Jack Handel blew his engine up, that perhaps if Jake Moloney couldn't get past Thomas Paul quickly, he would elect to come into the pits a bit earlier than he was intending to try and effect an undercut, as Thomas Paul is having an excursion off the racetrack, for which I'm sure his parent has not signed a permission slip, and he is now going to get passed by the two Zach Baker racing cars, who are still as close as they were before, and poor old Brody Steen catches up at the wrong possible moment, doesn't quite make his way through. Thomas Paul is slotted right into the middle of that battle, and there's a bit of contact there with Thomas Paul and Brody Steen, and all of a sudden the two Zach Baker racing cars have streaked away a few car lengths, and now Thomas Paul, who was looking very, very good for a comfortable 4th place, is going to have to fight to stay in this battle over 5th, 6th and 7th.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach Baker just ahead of them, trying to recover from that error that he made and repass his teammate once again. He is all over the back of him. He's going to have a go down into this right-hander, gets the job done. That might have been a little bit of formation flying there between the two Zach Baker racing cars. We've got GTARS saying that in the inaugural year of the GTs, the wind, rain and sand blasted $60,000 worth of vinyl wrap from the Lamborghini truck. So we're quite lucky to have the half dozen competitors we had back for the Australian GT. It's a little bit disappointing. Jake Moloney still 5.5 seconds behind Kurt Stenberg as we continue watching this battle. David Nenadick just going to have to try to defend from Thomas Paul behind him, who has Brody Steen, who just no luck, just joined Thomas Paul, rejoined the track just in time to get back up to speed before Brody Steen, who it looks as if the race on Oz.
I was just going to say Sean Allen, after his bad start, has reclaimed this battle. I think that might have been what you were about to say, as the race on Oz battle is now converging, as we've got David Nedidich going a little bit wide through turn 2. It's giving Thomas Paul a bit of an opportunity to reclaim that position, and Zach Baker is quite clear ahead of them in 4th place. Down the inside for Thomas Paul, and giving him the room is David Nedidich. Almost looks like he let him through there, struggling with grip apparently, and Thomas Paul fights his way back into 5th place.
Absolutely, but he has lost about 1.5 seconds to Zach Baker in getting past Zach Baker's teammate. Zach Baker probably wouldn't be too happy with David Neddick not making it particularly difficult for Thomas Paul to get through, as he now is going to put pressure on him. It looks as if the Zach Baker racing team and the Race on Oz racing team have their pit crews coming out possibly into the lane. We've got the little icon showing up for those two saying that they've requested a pit stop, so we might be starting to see some pit stops happening, and I believe we already have Stairs. I can see you making some feverish notes.
Yeah, Stephen Birchall has been the first driver to pull the trigger, and it'll be quite a while until we start to see anyone else come into the pits, because they're the part of the racetrack I would affectionately refer to as the boonies, where you basically don't see anyone. That's where one of our drivers, Mitchell Hathaway, served as a flag marshal, and now we're starting to see cars come in. So Zach Baker and Brody Steen jump out of that battle, and that may well prove to be a good move for them. We also see Ethan Warren emerging from his pit box. So the race leader also so quick in his pit stop, he's already finished his pit stop.
Yeah, he is going to rejoin down in about 8th place. Don't think that'll cost him any time though, because the cars ahead of him are probably all going to be thinking about doing the same thing in the very near future. Kurt Stenberg though has assumed the lead of the race for the time being. He's got just on 3 seconds over his teammate and championship rival Jake Moloney, which 15 positions up from his starting position is Jake Moloney, to put the pressure on Kurt Stenberg. Kurt Stenberg, he's gonna have to try to eke out that advantage for as long as he possibly can. The pit stops might help with that, but I reckon Jake Moloney has Kurt Stenberg covered in a straight fisticuffs fight, essentially. And Thomas Paul back up into the podium spot, so it looks as if he's gotten past. Well, Zach Baker pit, didn't he? That'd be why Thomas Paul has made that position up. So get to see how this all shakes out after the pit stops, because at the moment we're kind of looking at tea leaves in terms of trying to figure out how it's going to shake out afterwards.
Both the Trans-Tasman racing drivers have stayed out for another lap, so Jake Moloney and Kurt Stenberg have not elected to pit. Colin Warwick came in on the previous lap, and we're just waiting to see whether we see anyone else dive in, so that's very interesting. The Race on Oz and Zach Baker counterparts in that battle, David Nedich and Sean Allen, have not elected to pit. Will Devonish coming in currently, and also Jay Borg. But that's very, very interesting, because if the fresher tyres are worth something right now, then that will mean that the two Race on Oz and Race on Oz and Zach Baker cars who have pit may well get a bit of an undercut, but they'll take some pain later on in the race when the tyres get a bit older.
Oh, as Thomas McMillan gives us a very entertaining camera angle there as he shoots himself off the track, manages not to lose too much time or parts of his car as a result of it, but he is obviously getting a little bit worn on those tyres. We're just ticked over half distance, so at this point any pit stops from here are sort of diminishing returns, because you'll be on much fresher tyres, that you're giving the cars behind you much better opportunity to undercut you, as it was. It looks as if Kurt Stenberg is requesting a pit stop for the end of this lap, so Jake Moloney not following suit as yet.
And Kurt Stenberg has lost a second to Jake Moloney on the previous lap. That is just how quickly Jake Moloney is eking into that advantage, and look at the gap is now visual, and we believe Kurt Stenberg, as you said, coming into the pits on this lap, and he'll need every advantage he can possibly get. He does indeed come in, and Jake Moloney follows him.
That was incredibly close for Kurt Stenberg. It looked as if he was going to impact that entry wall in the pits. Managed to just pull it up in time, but it was his life would have been flashing before his eyes for a split second there as they both pull off into their respective pit boxes. Looks as if Jake Moloney's gotten into his pit box faster. We've got Sean Allen, Thomas Paul, and David Nenadick all diving in as well behind them. So it's going to be a very crowded pit lane in just a moment. Jake Moloney gets out fastest, but Kurt Stenberg manages to hold onto that position over his teammate. But they are going to be line astern coming out of the pits, which is exactly what we want to see. This is going to be a battle till the end of the race. We've got 8 laps to go. Let's have it. They get some rubber down from those rear tyres and some temperature in them. And Kurt Stenberg goes a little bit deep at turn 1 on those cold tyres. And that gap has now equalised to about 2 seconds. Oh no! As Thomas Paul gets a drive-through penalty for presumably speeding in the pit lane. So,
look at this!
Oh, so very close between the Race on Oz guys who have stayed out and the ones that pit earlier and the ones that have just pit. So Brody Steen has made up the position over Sean Allen and David Nenadick. And Zach Baker, where is Zach Baker? Zach Baker is back up into 4th place, so he's been the winner out of this whole affair. Thomas Paul, the big loser, going from fighting for a podium spot to a solid 4th place to 5th place and a drive-through, so he'll be looking at a worse result than that. Sean Allen down the inside of David Nenadick, managing to hold on to it, but David Nenadick has got the inside for these next couple of fast right-handers. It's very hairy. He's had to dip on the brakes a little bit because he just was not going to make the corner, but he's trying to hold it on the inside, pushes Sean Allen a little bit wide. He's still alongside, but then Sean Allen manages to cut up and cut off the apex there from David Nenadick, who has to slide in behind. That was some very, very close racing.
It was, and all while that was happening, up ahead, the guys were just streaking away a little bit. So it's a great battle for Sean Allen and David Nenadick, but it's a bit of a free kick for Brody Steen, who's caught up to Thomas Paul, who he'll be hoping takes his penalty straight away, and very, very unfortunate for Thomas Paul that that's going to drop him right out of that battle, perhaps even out of the top 10. And we've got a couple of cars yet to take their pit stops. Colin Warwick, I believe, or I haven't actually, I beg your pardon, he was one of the first to take his pit stop back on lap 11 as Thomas Paul jumps off into the pit lane and releases Brody Steen into 5th place. So Zach Baker has a decent old gap now, 3.5 seconds. Let's rejoin Jake Moloney. Let's see whether he can continue to eke out or continue to diminish that gap between himself and his teammate Kurt Stenberg. It's grown a little bit through this pit stop phase. It was out to, it was around about 2 seconds. It's nearly 3 seconds at the moment. But of course, they both have the exact same age tyres. It's a straight fight.
Absolutely is. Last time around was a 2:21.0 for Kurt Stenberg and a 2:21.4 for Jake Moloney. They were about 2 seconds dead on, as you say, coming out of the pits. So Kurt Stenberg getting the better of these tyres early on, but maybe he's just taking a little bit too much life out of them too fast. And Jake Moloney will be able to reel him in as the race wears on. All remains to be seen. Ethan Warren just checked out. 8.7 seconds in the lead currently for Astraltus Esports number 59. And not looking like he is going to be under any threat at any point during this race.
And the other thing about Ethan Warren is for the second race in a row, he's managed to set a time under 1 minute 50, which no one else has managed to do. So second fastest man on the racetrack, Jake Moloney, on a 150.081 for his best lap. Ethan Warren, thick end of half a second faster on his best lap this race.
It is an incredible effort, and that's basically a qualifying lap that he's set both races. And he goes faster again as we watch. So a 1:49.4 now for Ethan Warren, which I believe is actually faster than his qualifying time was. It's if not, it's quite close. Thomas Paul has rejoined down in 11th place, so that is a damn shame for a man that was fighting for a podium spot earlier on in this race. Kurt Stenberg still 2.7 seconds ahead of Jake Moloney, and Zach Baker coming up to lap, I believe that's Termo, with about 4 seconds gap over Brody Steen. So that gap has not come down between the Zach Baker Racing and Race on Oz Racing guys. Sean Allen has streaked out ahead of David Nenadick once he's made that position up. Gap is now about 3 seconds. And further back from that, we don't really have any close battles on track at the moment. And of course, we've got our 3 DNFs again this race so far. So gap between Jake Moloney and Kurt Stenberg still 2.7 seconds, and nothing really closer than that on track.
No, but we've got a few things on the simmer at the moment with the potential for Jake Moloney to close in on Kurt Stenberg. The other one I want to keep an eye on is the 2 Race on Oz drivers, because Brody Steen on the last lap lost 0.7 of a second to Sean Allen. No, I tell a lie, it was more than that. It was more like 0.8 of a second. So Brody Steen is losing time hand over fist to Sean Allen, who is a little bit out of position because he had a bad start. He started this race in 2nd place, but lost a lot of that at the beginning of this race and is setting about rectifying that right now. And look at that gap, just while we've been watching them, has come down in leaps and bounds.
Absolutely, and it has come down at the right time if you're Sean Allen, because it means you get a almighty tow down this main straight, which, as you said, longest straight in V8 Supercars. It is incredibly long.
Might be.
Conrad, oh well, yeah. When I quote my commentator, having not done any research myself, I rely on my co-commentator to have done the research.
I didn't say it was the longest. I said it's probably one of the longest.
Ah, okay. I can smell the beer on your breath. So, Sean Allen is right on the back of Brody Steen now, having a go down into this left-hander. It's a spot we've seen a few people do it, and Sean Allen has done it with not much worry at all. Brody Steen's tyres appear to be falling off a bit. He's a little bit leery.
Yeah, Brody didn't make that too difficult for Sean Allen. Teammates who look like they're going to win the team's championship based on the rate at which they're accruing points, and that's why, because they don't crash into each other. When Sean Allen comes up behind Brody Steen at thick end of a second a lap, Brody Steen acknowledges that and lets him go, and he'll be quite happy with 5th place. It's 5 seconds behind to David Nenadich. I wonder if Sean Allen has enough time left to catch up to Zach Baker. Zach Baker on the previous lap set a 51.3, and Sean Allen was almost exactly 1 second faster than that. So, well, it doesn't take too much of a mathematician to discern that might be a grandstand finish. They'll be converging on one another more or less at the end of the race, so if he does catch, there'll be only a couple of opportunities to make the move. Jake Moloney doesn't seem to have caught Kurt Stenberg quickly enough in the last few laps to put him under any sort of pressure, so that's another one that's holding steady at the moment.
It has come down a little bit. It was hovering around 2.7 seconds. It's now around 2 seconds on the dot. And it looks tantalizingly close on cameras because they're so close together on track, but it is a long track, so everything's sort of stretched a little bit, and looks like a short gap is about 2.3 seconds, and it isn't coming down in the leaps and bounds I would have been expecting from Jake Moloney after their pit stops, but he's still keeping himself with a watching brief on Kurt Stenberg. All it will take is a small mistake from Kurt Stenberg, who, in his own words, said this is one of the hardest tracks he's ever raced. All it will take will be a small mistake for Jake Moloney to find his way right up alongside his teammate, past him and beyond into 2nd place, which would be a fantastic return after the DNF from last race and starting from the rear of the grid this time around.
May well be one of the hardest racetracks that he's raced at, but it's set to be one of his best round results in terms of the points that he picks up. And Adelaide, in fact South Australian racetracks have been quite kind to him, picking up 2 second place finishes in the opening round in Adelaide, and on target for a second tonight, following up the 3rd place that he got in race 1, and that's pretty decent haul of points. Of course, there is the small matter of the remaining 3 laps of this race. Jake Moloney on the previous lap only took about 1/10 of a second out of Kurt Stenberg. Sean Allen has lost time to Zach Baker. It's about 5 seconds now, that gap that we were talking about, as Wayne Carr gets a drive-through penalty. And it doesn't look like he's come out of the pits, has he? No. So I wonder if that was for corner cuts. We've seen a couple of cars have their lap times invalidated. Colin Warwick didn't set a lap time on the previous occasion, suggesting to me that he has had a penalty as a track cut on the previous occasion. And we've also had another retirement after Jack Handel. Oz Robb has become the latest driver in this race not to finish.
Yeah, I was just going back to see if I could find what happened to Oz Robb, as we had Super Effective hop into the chat to say, "Come on, Oz Robb!" And that inspired me to have a look and see how Oz Robb is doing. And as it turns out, not well. It must have been a while ago that whatever it was that occurred to him that caused him to DNF, because I've been rewinding this replay for about 3 laps now, and I've still not come across it. So I'm going to put that one to bed. Damn shame for Oz Robb. Sorry, Super Effective, the one-man Oz Robb fan club, for not having something to cheer about there. But we've got something to cheer about at the moment. Yeah, there's the sad face from Super Effective. Do apologise for breaking the news to you this way. So Jake Moloney is slowly closing that down. It's just under 2 seconds at the moment between him and Kurt Stenberg, but only 2 laps to go. I don't think that's going to be enough time. Zach Baker and Sean Allen, which was that other little simmerer that we were discussing, looks like it's gone off the boil. Stayed at about 4 seconds between Sean Allen and Zach Baker. What are you oohing at?
Well, some of you who were listening to us a few moments ago would have noticed that I said that Ethan Warren was the only man in the 49s. Well, Kurt Stenberg and Jake Moloney have both since set 49s, and Jake Moloney is starting to eat into that advantage of Kurt Stenberg. Was on the previous lap, it was a 50.2 from Kurt Stenberg and a 49.9 from Jake Moloney. Since then, a 50.6 for Kurt Stenberg and a 50.2 for Jake Moloney. So another 0.4 of a second on that previous lap. They're 10 seconds.
Oh no!
Oh, who have we lost?
Stenberg!
Kurt Stenberg.
Oh!
What has happened there? Kurt Stenberg, pushing very, very hard to try and keep Jake Moloney behind him, has had a huge error, and I was very confused by the pictures I was looking at, because they're both Trans-Tasman racing cars, and we saw one of them in the fence. It's that part of the track. It spat him out. With the greatest respect to Kurt Stenberg, it wasn't his fault. I think he's kept it out of the wall, though, so a bad moment becomes not a disaster. At least he still is in third place, but he's lost that position to Jake Moloney, which is very, very disappointing for us who all wanted to see a battle. Unbelievable.
Absolutely. I knew, I could feel it in my bones. There was something wrong with that sequence of corners. It hasn't caught anyone out that we've seen so far, although we have got 5 DNFs, so it could be any one of them has had it happen to them. But the track just seems to grab you and spit you across and into the grass. He's managed to keep it out of the wall, I think, although the car does not seem to be handling particularly well. So it could be that he's got a little bit of steering rack damage. But as you say, he's still in third place, and he still will be carrying a points advantage over Jake Moloney from this weekend if he manages to remain there. But God, what could have been, that second place was looking ever so close.
Yeah, only a lap and a half to go now, so the tyres will be starting to get old, and that spin would not have helped the tyres very much as well. Jay Borg is running in 9th place quite comfortably for Super Effective, who's following along, hoping that you haven't just given him the curse, but he's currently on target for a top 10 finish, which will net him a decent haul of points. Our race leader, Ethan Warren, is just coming up to the final sector of the racetrack on his penultimate lap with a 10-second advantage. He can button off and put the banana in his pocket as far as he's concerned. He's still setting, well, he's dropped down into the high 51s now, so he has buttoned off. In fact, he's downright smashed the banana. So great job so far from Ethan Warren. He can just coast home from here.
Absolutely. Yeah, he can definitely put the Q in the rack and then pack the rack away, take it to a carpentry shop to have it refurbished, because he...
Wayne Carr.
Oh, Wayne Carr. Wayne Carr has DNF'd, yes. I think I mentioned that a couple of laps ago, but I appreciate you just pointing at the screen and saying Carr. As if I did not know that I was already looking at cars. So apart from the drama of Kurt Stenberg, we have Thomas Paul looking like he is going to try to make a late race position over Colin Warwick for last spot in the top 10. Colin Warwick sort of anonymous this race. He's up 6th places from his start in 16th. But Thomas Paul, who was fighting for the podium, currently down 6 places on his start, so he will be wanting to try to at least nab himself a top 10, as he's all over the curb, trying to get any advantage he can in this battle. Colin Warwick, is a very, very consistent and clean racer, so he will be not an easy pass to make. But nevertheless, we're about to start the last lap. Ethan Warren is a solid 10.5 seconds ahead of Jake Moloney, who himself is 10 seconds ahead of Kurt Stenberg after his issue, and Kurt Stenberg himself 10 seconds ahead of Zach Baker in 4th place. So very spread out at the top of the field, Stairs. but it's been a pretty bloody gripping race to behold. Thomas Paul still not able to get that job done yet on Colin Warwick. He's got about 3/4 of a lap, I reckon, to get that job done. And then at least he can hang his hat on a 10th place, which is a pretty low thing to hang your hat on, but still, it's not on the floor.
No, it's not on the floor, but I think, oh, here we go, a little bit wide there for Colin Warwick, but the next corner goes to the right, and Thomas Paul is not close enough to get up the inside. Ethan Warren, goodness gracious, he was further ahead than I thought he was. He's come across the line to win the race, and a perfect round for Ethan Warren. Fastest lap in both races, pole position, and the win. Unbelievable. Doesn't really get much better than that, as Jake Moloney claims second place ahead of his teammate Kurt Stenberg and trims that championship lead down back to 156 points, but Kurt still holding a race wins advantage worth in that battle. So Zach Baker's going to come home in 4th place. It's all kicking off down. It looks like Colin Warwick is coming under renewed pressure there from Thomas Paul. Let's rejoin that battle, as Colin Warwick has somehow managed to stay ahead. They were side by side just before we cut to them. And Thomas Paul looks like he'll have one more opportunity. Oh, hugely defensive line. Continues to close off the line there. And Colin Warwick, well, he gave him just about a car's width, but not an inch more. And they're still side by side here. This is shades of Marquez and Rins at the Silverstone Grand Prix on the weekend in the MotoGP. But it's going to be Thomas Paul who hangs on as they drag race to the line. And, well, Colin Warwick will be a bit disappointed about losing out on that right at the end. And, wow, what a fantastic race we've just had.
Absolutely. Excellent work from Thomas Paul to hang his hat on that 10th place right at the death. Manages to... It was about a cigarette paper's width between those cars, I think, running down into the penultimate corner. But he managed to squeeze his car into that particular small gap. Which is something I've done many times in my life. So we have Ethan Warren, who is our unprecedented, unbeatable, uncomparable driver for this particular round, with 2 completely dominant wins. After a bad start, it was looking like it was going to be against him in the second race, but he quickly put that back right again, getting himself up into 1st place, and then just streaked away as Jake Moloney, 15 positions from his starting place up into 2nd place, with Kurt Stenberg with a late race accident at that little tricky part of the circuit that I reckon might be a little bit glitchy, causing some errors for him and dropping him down into 3rd place. But that was looking like it was going to be a easy 2nd place for Kurt Stenberg, but gone begging, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, those of you with a long memory will remember that Jake Moloney lost out to a track glitch back in the Perth Super Night event a few months ago, so easy come, easy go from that perspective, as the top 3 pose for the traditional photo, and Jake Moloney goes back to pits, leaving Kurt Stenberg and Ethan Warren to do a long line of 11s in celebration of what has been an absolutely stellar night from his perspective, emulating his performance back in Darwin, where he claimed both victories there as well, and really announcing himself on the stage in terms of chance of winning the championship. I say a chance, he would have to be absolutely flawless from now until the end of the year. But as far as the points go, 2,352 points now to Kurt Stenberg, and that puts him clear by 156 points of Jake Moloney, who's sitting there on 2,196. It's a further almost 600 points behind for Ethan Warren, so he's got a lot of work to do. That's before we counter in the drop round, of course, so lots and lots of things to occur between now and the end of the year when we decide our champion.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, that basically sums it up. Decent, good races tonight. Some really tight battling around what, by all accounts, is a quite challenging circuit. and some a little bit of drama there with the late accident from Kurt Stenberg and Jake Moloney's incidents in race 1. So both of our championship protagonists having quite dramatic races, but in different ways. Stairs.
Very much so. We now can take our opportunity to have a chat with some of the drivers who've joined us in the chat. No Ethan Warren as yet, the winner of both races, or Mark Pickett, but we do have Kurt Stenberg, championship leader, who finished third in both races. Kurt, it's been a bit of a tricky week for you, battling a bit of illness heading in, but 2 podium finishes, pretty solid night for you.
Yeah, surprisingly solid night at a track that I didn't think I'd go very well at, considering I'm not that great at fast-flowing tracks. But yeah, happy to come out of it with 2 podiums.
Tell us about that moment in the second race. It looked to us like you may have been able to keep Jake Moloney behind you for second, but that track glitch, it looked like a track glitch, spitting you off in the middle sector.
Yeah, there's a track glitch on where the circuits join if you hit it at the wrong angle, and yeah, I managed to go over it and hit it at the wrong angle. Just a small mistake that punishes you quite heavily. That track is so hard to... it's very easy to make a mistake, and it puts you out of your rhythm, and yeah, just a small... when it's slightly deep into the corner before, slightly wide on exit, run wide, and I just wanted to make sure I didn't hit the wall once I hit the glitch, so...
You say it's a difficult track. Is it difficult in that sort of, like Monaco Grand Prix kind of way where it's you feel like an absolute legend when you nail it, or is it difficult in a, oh god, I just want this to be over kind of way?
Almost a bit like an Oran Park. Like you don't feel like you get a break. Like you feel like in every corner you're thinking about the next part of the track, and the only real break's the main straight. So you just constantly, and if you make one tiny mistake in one corner, it affects especially around the back, it affects the next run of the corners, and you miss the apexes there as well. So, yeah, I don't know, kind of wanted it over at the end of that second one, but so it is a bit like that. But yeah, it's just a difficult track just to keep your mind concentrated on what you're doing.
Well, that's certainly what it looked like from our perspective. Congratulations once again on the double podium and extending your championship lead, Kurt Stenberg. No other drivers from the podium have elected to join us, so we'll move swiftly on. Madbird, what did you make of tonight's racing? It was the first time that we've seen this racetrack in Automobilista, and there was a lot of unknowns going into tonight.
Yeah, there were. Wasn't really sure where to be looking at for overtaking opportunities, that sort of thing. Obviously, start finish straight, first corner is a obvious one, but apart from that, there were a couple of surprise ones that popped up. That tight left-hander, I believe it is turn 6, turned out to be a bit of a good overtaking opportunity. People flinging it up the inside, lots of different lines through there. So that was quite entertaining, and some pretty decent racing, actually. A lot of very close racing between 2 or 3 cars at a time, which is nice to see. So on the whole, I really quite enjoyed tonight.
So did I. Well, that's all for this month anyway. We've got a few weeks until the next round in New Zealand. Thank you again to our drivers, or for Kurt Stenberg, the only podium sitter to grace us with his presence post-race and have a bit of a chat. We thank you very much because we do appreciate it, but we are all out of time. So we'll see you next month as we head across the ditch for the Auckland SuperSprint at Pukekohe Park on Tuesday, the 17th of September. Until then, bye for now.